Andy Peterson. I work for the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce.
What do you know about solar?
Well, solar is really kind of the new big wave of energy production. I know that in the United States, solar is kind of coming online, but in other countries, Europe, and places like that, that solar is becoming a very, very large piece of the pie. So I know that much about it, and I know that there's ample opportunity to manufacture solar equipment and solar power generating devices.
Is solar something viable for northern Minnesota?
Solar is viable on a couple of fronts. It's viable as a supplement to our energy grid. It's not enough to provide a base for our energy grid, but it certainly is enough to help supplement it. And we do that currently through the wind generation in North Dakota, in southwestern Minnesota, and parts of the range. But it is possible in other areas as well, up along the ridge of Lake Superior, and maybe even in some of the water areas. So it is possible. It is something that if we research it properly, bring the right people to the table, it's something we could do in this area.
What about manufacturing? How can we create jobs?
Manufacturing is always the risk and reward thing. But I can tell you this, that we do have a really great workforce for manufacturing in our area. Cirrus Design is a great example. They produce some pretty high-tech machinery, and that takes a very educated workforce, and we do have that right now in northern Minnesota, and we have excess capacity of it. So it's available if we can put all the pieces together.
What kind of incentives do we have to bring up or make happen?
Oftentimes it's a tax incentive, and it has to do with investments as far as capital equipment. Minnesota is not something right now, our state, that's very friendly to that. You have to put the capital in and at the end of the year apply for a credit for the sales tax, things like that. So there's some policy adjustments we have to make there. As far as finding the potential, the government at this point probably needs to provide some tax incentives for companies to take the risk. In other words, it's a huge outlay of cash. How can the government supplement that for a while until the industry stabilizes and becomes a norm? Then at that point back off on those incentives. But you have to have incentives in place. It's every manufacturing question is always a matter of incentives. If you have the proper incentives, people will take the risk. It's that simple.
And what you're saying is they're probably not in place right now.
They're probably not in place at the moment, and we just need to work with some of those and take advantage first of the federal pieces, and then the state has to come in and provide some statewide incentives, and of course our local governments need to understand that this will benefit them, provide some local incentives, if at all possible.
The solar on the federal level.
David Ross, the president of the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, David, what do you know about solar?
I know that there are a few businesses in town that are starting to make this a larger part of their business, a larger part of their client base. I know that initiatives in town are underway, and yet it's really at the genesis, and it's been talked about, I know, for years. I've heard much more about wind than I have solar because of Minnesota Power, and we have a close connection with them. I also know that I built a home a few years ago and worked as much as I could with different technology companies who are, when it comes to building in solar technology into residential homes, are well on their way, and so I'm encouraged by it.
Is solar something viable for northern Minnesota?
Oh, I think, yes, it is. And people think that because we're here in the Northland that somehow it is not viable. And I think there have been studies done that illustrate that the units that are generated, even this far north, are certainly something that can be captured and made good use of.
How about manufacturing? How do we tap into the manufacturing? Because, from the solar is viable at a certain level here, and there's a lot of different stuff. But the manufacturing, you can tap into these international markets, so you're creating the product here and selling it internationally. Can you just talk about what the potential of job creation is? What
Sure.
we're looking at there?
Duluth has a history of manufacturing, and we certainly were at our peak in World War II, where that was a lead for our community economically. And so we have the understanding of manufacturing, and as solar energy develops and the manufacturing of its solar panels, things such as that are a bigger part of this national economy, we should be a natural site for that because of the workforce we have and because of the understanding of manufacturing.